The next speaker is Vikash Kumar from Google Brain. He got his PhD from University of Washington from this department, worked with Emmo Todorov, and has been is a research scientist in Google Brain, and has also been at different places like OpenAI as well. And we are very excited about his talk. It's going to include very cool demos with 2 robots as well. So looking forward to it.
Everyone. All right. I'm very excited to be here. It's nostalgic to come back to the place that you learned so much, and then I have something to share, so it's exciting as well. I've learned 2 things over the last 2 days. If your advisor is speaking at the same workshop, it's a nightmare for you, because he tells half the story and then shits on the rest. So I'm going to try to pick pieces somewhere from what he said and some of the pieces where I think we have been able to move past some of the challenges. And I think Byron Talks is very much aligned with those challenges, and we will see like what the parallels are, what the lessons are. Some of the differences from previous speakers that I want to highlight right away is I'm not trying to prove anything. These are merely data points of how far we have been able to push. Absence of something here doesn't mean it doesn't work. It just means that I haven't tried it. You all should try it. Okay? So these are data points of how far we can push the complicated system. Some of the differences in the applications will be that these are really high-dimensional systems where you cannot form any kind of simulator, much like what Byron was mentioning. We are talking about dimensionality roughly between 60 to 100 dimensional spaces with a lot of deformation. There is no rigid body assumption that is probably valid over there. And the second thing I want to also point out is the state distribution shifts quite a bit. So unlike Byron, where like you're going on the track, this is like you can't really visit the same place again. Almost those kind of settings. And as if you guys haven't noticed, these are all pictures of hands. So this kind of gives you the diversity of the things a manipulator of this dimension can actually take. So this motivates problem very nicely is if things are that nasty and that complicated and that's your state space, let's figure out what's possible. All right, and I'm going to be talking about something what we take as granted privileges, I'm calling them. A lot of people just take assumptions. That's another word that we use commonly. And I'm going to be highlighting a spectrum between the model-based and the model-free side of things. So we'll see how things are, where they are in the applications and the areas that I'm interested in. So fair bit of reality check. Emmo talked about this in his talk. We roughly did this in 2012. And things work in real time. You probably saw movies where you can toss things on the ground. It beautifully gets up. It does cartwheel. And we all clap. And it's great. But if you do reality check, this is what things look like today. And this is coming from Boston Dynamics, which is known to get things to work. Right? It's trying out things to place things. It topples. There are wheels. The cart falls down. Everything that can go bad will go bad. Basically, that's the sad reality. So what is the difference between the two? And one of the key differences between the two systems is on the left, when we got these results, we have perfect access to the dynamics of the system. On the right, you have no access to the dynamics of the system. Let's just relax it a little bit. You know kinematics, you know somewhat of the dynamics, but the reality is so far away from what you can estimate, what you can simulate, that things like these are inevitable, it will go wrong. Okay? So my arguments here will be trying to see that like how we take some of these performances from here and try to move there.
I just want to contrast this to Byron's talk, because the lesson from Byron's talk to me was that if you're computing online at a very high frequency, that even a very crude model can go a really long way. So I was wondering, like, okay, these guys are really high-tech, but like if you increase the frequency more and like, you know, maybe just throwing more computation at it is going to do it.
I'm with you. Let's make that argument together.
Yeah.
All right? I'll follow along with that argument. Yeah. So I'm just going to make the point that like this is the reality in the way that from hardware experts that they know how to get things working still are struggling based on the best they can do. All right, and there is a reason, and like we are going to ground those into actually scientific challenges and see how we can make progress in those dimensions. This was the picture that Emma showed to motivate a lot of things. And question I want to ask here is like, how can he even build a model of this thing and then do all the nonlinear trajectory optimization that he preached the religion here yesterday, right? And the answer probably is not very clear. It goes somewhere along the direction of what Byron also mentioned, that like, yes, model is very impressive and concise representation of information, but getting access to it is incredibly hard. It's a powerful piece, but how do we build that? How do we get there? I think that's where the key is. All right, so I'm going to build up couple of results, and I'm going to put them in a spectrum. On the right, where we have no access to the model, which is the like I'm saying red, and on the left, when we have full access to the model. And we will see what works, what doesn't work, how far things are along this spectrum as a data point, not as a proof that these are the ceilings. All right, keep that in mind, because these are very personal related to the work that I have done.
So when you say full access to model, you mean like...
I have a full simulator.
And that simulator is accurate?
So let's just say the system I can query and the system I'll execute is exactly the same.
Okay.
That's, yes.
Yeah.
So the first one is you have full access to the simulator. You can query the simulator at any rate you want. I'm going to call something over here as 1x sample. That means during the execution time, how many samples do you need to execute versus how many samples do you query to execute. So this can be executed in real time. I'll go a little bit more into details into this in a little bit. And I think very well motivated by Byron, online trajectory optimization, optimal control has been incredibly successful in these domains, but you have full access to the model. Roughly the way these settings work is there is a robot model, which is a fully global model of the dynamics. You can query, it will tell you exactly what happens in the next state. There is assumption of a state estimator where you know where you are, where the state is, and then you present goal using some intuitive cost functions. You hit it with an optimizer, optimize really, really fast. You get behavior, so iterate over and over again, and you deploy these things in an online model predictive control settings. I think we heard about that a lot. Roughly speaking, the way this works is you're at some point, you want to make a plan, you want to execute a little bit of it, and it's like, oh, the world is not exactly the way I thought it would be. Let's make that step and let's plan again. So you just kind of iteratively update the thing. And there was a little bit of discussion that Byron put forward is like, why does MPC work? I think roughly I agree. There is always a plan. You keep re-optimizing the plan. If the world behaves differently, so be it. You just iterate and go forward. Using these techniques, we have been able to show very dynamic movements of the order of like this. Roughly, the dimensionality of the system we are talking about is about 60-dimensional system. We have full access to the ground state, full access to the dynamics function over here. The objective here is there is a hand, which is about 30 degrees of freedom. There is a 6 degree of freedom object that randomly falling in the scene. Your objective is to stabilize the object. That's what you know, that the object has to be up there in the air somewhere, and all the details of the movements are automatically synthesized. You do not tell anything about the details of the movement, so that's the beautiful part. When you have access to the dynamics, we have planners that can do amazing things. And you will see it fails. It's trying to slip, and it kind of re-optimizes, which is like one of the lessons, that fast re-optimization can give you a lot of things. And if another beautiful part of this is it's a reusable machinery, which is also something that we want to do, that we want a machinery, a framework, an algorithm that can solve multiple things. It can take the same machinery, we ask it to do typing, just change the goal state to something that says typing, and you can on the fly keep updating the goal. Since it's constantly replanning, it adapts, it kind of does like nice things. You can apply perturbations, replan, etc. Things glorious, everything happy, robotics is solved, we can go home. All right. All right, so like I want to take my take of like why I think MPC actually works, and it does make sense in the real world. When we are executing, we are never executing to the optimum. So even if we know how to get to the optimum in a provable way, probably doesn't make sense to spend that compute to go to the optimum. You're only going to you're only going to execute for a little bit, so your best bet is to get a good plan in this like small narrow horizon. So focus your compute over there, get the best update you possibly can, and leave everything to hope. But can we do better than hope? Yes, you can do better than hope, which is what we call value function. You put the value function at the end, and that kind of gives you the hope. You extrapolate based on the hope. But the thing is, we overfit to the current situations, and you just hope that that kind of carries forward. And then replanning does the magic for you. But the challenges here are that if the value function is not good enough, you do start getting stuck in local minima. But that's the problem today. I have no answer. But that's the reality, that you do get stuck in local minima, and if you have a better value function, you have a hope to get out of the minima. So over here, what we just said, that like once you have full access to the dynamics, we can use gradient-based planner that exploit the dynamics, give you really, really fast recompute power, so that you can execute these kind of behaviors in real time, which I'm calling 1x number of samples. If you have access to the dynamics, I also showed you can generalize one setting, different settings, throw different cost functions. That's fine. I will probably say that these kind of assumptions and settings are only possible in simulation. That's why I'm putting a label simulation over there, that it works in simulation. If we want to run it in the real system, the access to the dynamics function, the true dynamics function, is not available. So the benefits that we get from gradient-based and MPC planner cannot directly transfer in real world. Questions? All right. So before filling the spectrum, let's take to the other side. Completely other side, where we have no access to the dynamics function. What we are going to do is we are going to do just completely model-free RL, and we are going to build a policy that exactly solves the task that we are trying to solve. So what will happen is we will get what we want to do, but nothing more, nothing less than that. And the best thing we can hope over there is we generalize a little bit on the thing that we want to do. You can't do anything more than that. And the beauty over there is, like, in these constrained settings, things do work on the hardware, but the sample complexity is incredibly worse. You will see while these things work in 1x samples, they take like maybe 10 to the power 4, they're slower 10 to the power 4, because you're just sampling the system over and over and over and over, and that kind of exhausts the system. I'm going to show you some results which have been presented in the work over here. But I'm going to motivate it from a little bit different standpoint. If some of you were here yesterday, Emma showed this amazing graph where you have a flat basin where you have no gradient information, you can't really move, and then there is a really nice shape over there. If you push over there, you can optimize. But the problem is that pushing in this good space is hard. And if the space of hand and manipulation is that high dimensional, that it becomes incredibly challenging. So for most of these things that we are going to talk about right now, we solve this problem by adding a little bit of demonstration that kind of focuses you into the right area, and then we'll let the optimization do the magic. Okay? So those are the two ingredients over there. If you ask if we just have access to the demonstration to focus you in the right space, why not just do behavior cloning, et cetera, et cetera? There is a small restriction or budget I'm going to enforce myself that I'm going to use a really low number of demonstrations. It's 25 demonstrations, somewhat manageable. Your budget is right. You can kind of get those demonstrations easily, even if it takes a lot of work. You can just have 5 people like hold the robot and do 25 demonstrations in a way. But the problem of just doing behavior cloning is that if it has to work, it will take a lot of demonstration to work. If you execute, the state mismatch is going to be too much, and you will run into compounding errors. This is never going to execute in the real world properly. And if you ask the question why this is happening, is because behavior cloning is just trying to solve the wrong problem to begin with. It's trying to produce the optimal action given the demo distribution instead of the induced state distribution. When you execute, you don't remain in the demo distribution. You go out of the distribution, compounding errors, everything, you drop the object, everything fails. You're crazy. But what it does, it just puts you in that right space where you can actually focus your exploration and then fine tune from there properly. So what we say is what you do is you do your policy update. The top is the policy update, and the bottom is you also add a function which asks you to stay close to these demonstrations. And there is this weighing function that you just anneal away over time. And that kind of gets you started. So in the beginning, the top policy update will not give you any information because you're so far from doing anything meaningful. Only thing you can hope for is like staying close to your demo distribution because it's taking you to the right place in the subspace. And as you start annealing away the W term over there, then it says that like, okay, I'm in the right space, I can throw away the demonstration, I don't really care what was proposed to me, but I can use the power of like sampling, updates, policy updates to go beyond what was demonstrated to me. And that will be critical because you don't have a lot of demonstration. 25 demonstrations in these high dimensional spaces mean nothing. And in these kind of settings, we have been able to show that you can do fairly complex behaviors of the kind where you don't only have a manipulator, which is high degree of freedom manipulator, but the manipulator is also interacting and understanding these various objects and their target configurations. And dealing with free object is somewhat subtle and it doesn't really work. And it's hard to understand why, but there are some intuitions I can share, is the base of the arm is working on a very large space. And the fingers are working on a really small space. So there is this space mismatch between the two, and the coordination needs to happen is that the arm really needs to coordinate, and this precise action needs to go exactly at the right time for all these things to come together. Because you will, when these things are being trained, you will see the arm going the right place, but the finger not doing the right thing. When the finger tries to do the right thing, the arm is in the right place. These kind of local minima are very prominent in these problems. So yeah, like we can do picking of balls, we can use different kind of tools, opening the door. The dynamics here is primarily dependent on the door, so you can't really overpower the door. So these are interesting things. Another interesting aspect that falls out of this is roboticists has been trying to get to human-like behaviors for a really, really long time. And they're trying to enforce it in a lot of different ways. Velocity constraint, the jerk free, etc., etc. But these are all approximations or understanding of what we think human-like means, right? But if you have these 25 demonstrations I'm talking about that implicitly encode what being human-like mean. So this kind of falls out for free almost, that it gives you the right inductive bias to be like humans. So if you see on the right side, you will see like these artifacts are very real if you do a lot of shaping and get things to work. But like, yeah, it gets the job done. But that artifact that we are looking for, like what it means to be gentle, nimble, being like human, almost comes out for free, which people have been trying for a really long time. And these things do tend to kind of make, the addition of demonstration do tend to make the policy a little bit more robust. I'm not going to go into details, but we check some robustness characteristics on the right, and the higher it is, the better robust it is to both the axes, which are different perturbations to the system. So now I'm going to start filling up the gap in the middle. Okay, but before we start, any questions? All right, either everything's clear or nothing. Great. So now the question is that I'm very much proposing that access to the model is critical and nice. And I'm trying to get more and more access to the model, and I'm going to start building this model because access to the model automatically or from a simulator is just not the reality of the world today. Okay, so let's see how we can build a model to the system. So in this case, what we are going to do is we are not going to focus on developing a full model, but we are going to focus on developing a model which is very rudimentary in the sense that it's trying to exactly learn the model around the things it's trying to do. So what we're going to do is check out that robot box, which was the full physics model. I'm going to start substituting that box with a partial model, which is a time-varying linear model, parameterized directly on the sensor data. So we are not talking about joint angle positions or nice properties of velocities, etc. Whatever is your sensor, we're just going to go for the sensor data. And that's where we are going to build a model. And we are going to adapt as we go on the model. So very briefly, let's look at the right. What it's trying to do is if you have a policy which is time-varying on the time-varying model, we are going to query the policy to give us the actions that it wants to take at the moment. We are going to execute those actions on the real system. As we have the actions, we are going to update the model. And we are going to keep doing it over and over.
So is this basically just like model identification and depth control?
You
Like
can
a neural network model?
This is
I know
a
the
dynamics model.
details for
Yes.
thing matter, but
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So we are trying to make a simple model that we can quickly adapt with less amount of data. And the beautiful thing over there is going to be that we are picking the linear model in a way that we can run gradient-based optimization on it to actually get the good effects of MPC on top over there. Essentially, everything I said, except one part, it's kind of important to bound the model update by a KL. And this is because you don't get to query the real system quite a bit. So if you make aggressive updates, there is a very good chance that you're going to fall really, really far off. And even if it is one bad update, it's going to take you somewhere really bad, which you can't recover. So if you bound this with the KL, and the noisier your system is, the tighter you should keep the bound. And if the system is better and better behaved, you can relax and make it bigger and bigger. So that's kind of a human intuition over there that goes how closer the bound should be. Let's start looking into a demo, what we can do over here. So again, a human hand shaped robot. What we are trying to do is trying to rotate free-floating object in the space along different axes over there, X, Y, Z, and you can see over there. And most of these behaviors are learned with 60 trials. So we are not talking about thousands or even millions, thousands. We are talking about just 60 trials. And agreed, these things are very simple. We are trying to do simple things like rotation, but if you see the kind of behaviors that need to exhibit in order to get those things right, it's quite complex. The pinky has to push, the middle finger has to pivot, the thumb has to get in and out of the whole system has to stabilize, because initially what you'll see that it will just drop the whole thing. It doesn't even understand how to stabilize the system, and it'll start dropping the system. And it is general, again, in the same sense that you're building a model. Given the model, you can do a lot of things. And since you can build a model easily, benefits of MPC, you can repurpose all of those things into like different behaviors. Over here, here is roughly each iteration is roughly 5 rollouts. So about 12 is about 60 trials that we have done. So what we're able to show right now is that an extremely sample efficient process. It can work with contact dynamics, which presents a lot of constraint in the actual dynamics. So these are not smooth dynamics, and it does work in real system. But there is an interesting thing that is going on over here, that it did converge over here, but what did happen here? So what we ended up doing in this case is you start the system at the same place initially because it's not good. So you want to help the system by starting the system more or less in the same place, and it's updating its own estimate so it iteratively gets better and better. But the moment you think that it has gotten better, now you start destabilizing the system. You don't reset, or you reset in a very noisy way, and those perturbations you see down there are exactly, it's trying to adapt the learned behavior, the learned policy to the real world realities that, yes, the system is never going to stay in the same place. You have to adapt based on that. And it does learn a really robust policy, but around the task that we are trying to do, it doesn't generalize to a different task. Sorry. Yes?
So how did you learn the local linear models? Like you learn them for every time step, or like?
Correct. So basically we start with a uniform policy that just random perturbations. There is a task. So given the task, given the model, you optimize just ILQG, LQR, you can do all those things, pick the actions, execute those actions, you have a new model, and you update the based on the task. Yeah.
And iterative
yes,
learning control.
Correct. Yes. So we did 12 updates over here. Each update's collected about 5 trajectories in this case.
And what's the starting policy? Where you
Just random policy.
wait,
So like, yeah, uniform, sorry, uniform
Uh,
policy. Yeah.
but you drop you just keep dropping.
It just keeps dropping, yes. Initially, just like, you will stay there, it's uniform policy, it just like flops because the weight of the system weight of the thing is too big, so it starts stopping, it tries to move, and it just falls.
And you have the starting simulator.
There is no simulator involved here.
Okay.
So directly on the real system, from step 0, the first data was collected by a random policy putting the object on the hand, and it's now trying to do like
You
just
have part of the model like the actuators and sensors.
no,
right?
nothing. Input to the system is completely raw potentiometers values from the joint angles, and the action space is a little bit more convoluted over here because we are going through pneumatics. So there are pneumatic channel. We don't even have a model for pneumatics. We are directly controlling pneumatics at the voltage at the valve.
And what's the size of the stage dimension on this?
100 to 112. So we have all the joint angles, joint velocities, the pneumatic pressure, because that's a third order system, so you've got to add that pressure into the system, and the first order derivatives of that, and information about the object.
And you just fill in the local like
Yes. Yes.
There is no tactile sensing.
No.
It's numb figures.
I can discuss that. There is a very strong belief that it will help. I do believe it will help, but I have never been able to show that it actually helps. And there are hypotheses. I'm happy to share that
Wait,
offline.
and sorry. So what's the variables for the object? So the angles and the.
So the object is just a free. It knows the position and quaternions of the object.
Okay. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So it's not sensing the object using touch.
And that you just have some video that tells you.
Correct. So this is in a motion capture setup, which
Okay,
just
okay,
gives
yes,
like
yes.
positions and orientations of the objects.
In what sense is the regression local?
In the sense that it's optimizing exactly for the tasks. So the way the policy and the model updates, that it actually updates where you solve the task and it just forgets everything else.
But it's a full LQR model.
Correct. But local in the sense of trajectory that it is planning to get the task done.
Okay, not per state. or per
No.
state.
Yeah, like the whole state vector. Yeah. Okay, so in this case, what we are able to like, in this case, what we did, we built a local model, we learned that model, and we used the good properties of a model over here, which are the gradients, and we did it better than what we did in the model free settings. It's still not real time because we have to go through the 60 iterations to get more data. There is no generalization in this case, but things are robust for the task that you are doing. We didn't get any generalization because we have no idea what happened outside the task distribution. It does work on the hardware. Okay, so we are going to move a little bit on this side of the system now. That we are going to start learning not local, but partial models now. Okay, and let's see what the details over here are. So the details are somewhat weird because this is under review, and since I am no longer in academia, Google lawyers tell me that I can't share the details. So in assumption that no one is going to tell Google lawyers anything about this, I'm going to give you some details. Okay? Hopefully no Google people are here to me. So I'm not going to give full details over here, but enough to actually make my point. But if there is something not clear, please ask me offline. I might be able to share some more. Okay? What we are trying to do here is we are not trying to build a global model. We are trying to build partial models. What are these partial models? We don't know, but we are going to build an ensemble of partial models. And it's important why it's an ensemble. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. Each of these models are represented by a neural network, just feed forward. We have tried LSTMs, have not been able, it works, have not been able to show that they're a little bit better, or even a little bit better than the feed forward ones, but I do believe that we haven't pushed it hard enough. So I think we're going to do it there. So what we are going to do here is the same settings as the previous one. We can only interact with the system in a reasonable budget. We can't interact with the system way too much, what we are going to do is, based on this collection of the data set that we get from the interaction, we're just going to start fitting an ensemble. These ensembles are different ensembles with different seeds, so they will behave a little bit differently. And it's important here to build ensemble, because what happens is, as you update the model of the system, they do not capture the reality very well, because you don't have that much data to capture the reality in these high dimensional spaces. So we are using an ensemble as a proxy of how good the real world, how good understanding of the real world we have. If all the ensembles tends to give you the right update, the same update, that means that we have captured the system well over there, and we are going to trust that update. But if all the ensembles tend to differ in what the predictions are, that we are going to say that we don't understand the system at that point, and we are going to, in next iteration, prioritize getting those samples better. So that's our metric of where to sample and how to sample. In previous one, the way we sampled was just directly shot for the policy. Where policy was trying to take you, we went there. But in this case, we have a weighted way of sampling, where we are asking the policy, what is the task update, push me in that direction. I want to build a model over there, but we also want to say that if I don't understand the system in some place, I do want to sample over there to build an understanding of the system in that place as well. And that's how the whole thing goes. And in this case, we are able to show that we can learn models that generalize. It's not really task specific, but it generalizes roughly in the same family of tasks. So if you're trying to, let's play some videos, and I can share some insights over here. So here we are trying to turn this three-finger valve, oh my goodness, the picture, is to the target. And that was marked by the green spot. And the next one, we are trying to rotate the cube in different configurations. Right? The target is marked on the right. So those are so for the rotation task, if you try to rotate and learn a model for 90 degrees, 180 degrees, you learn the model, and it generalizes to other parts of the state space, because it's trying to learn a partial model of what it means to rotate. It's not trying to learn a trajectory in this case. So we are getting access to the dynamics model that you can retarget by changing a cost function later, as long as your state visitation roughly remains the same. If the state visitation differs too much, you can't do much. All right? So in the case of the cube that I showed, that we did a lot of side turns, this turn, that turn, and it generalizes to the other turns that we have never showed data about. Okay? And the beauty of this is that now there's a lot of ablations which are now going to go into details over here, but the important part is the green lines on all three of them. That it is ridiculously sample efficient for higher order or more difficult tasks than a lot of the sample on policy as well as off policy methods that are available today. It doesn't work for everything that on policy, off policy can solve, but at least for the settings that we have been trying, it is ridiculously sample efficient. And it does give you some generalization in roughly the same task family. So yeah, I'm sorry there's not a lot of detail I can share, but if there are some high-level questions, I can try to take that right at the moment. Yes?
This idea of learning generally how to rotate as opposed to learning a trajectory, does it go does it go both ways, or does it go one way? For instance, if I'm learning how to rotate a cube, I have to learn how to rotate on a lot of dimensions. So then maybe if the next task was to just spin a pen, I could do that very well, but would it not go in the other direction? If I just learned how to rotate a pen, I might have trouble learning the cube. Does it make sense to start with a harder task in terms of rotation, and then it generalizes forward?
It does make sense. Provided, so here we are not really giving the detail of what the object is. So if you're learning this model in a full point cloud space, then it will actually understand. But as far what we have tried is we have put a tracker on top, and then we have learned just in the state space, and we haven't given geometric information of the object, which gets implicitly embedded in the model at the moment. But if you learn it more generally, I do believe it will actually start transferring. Yes? All right. So that's, and let me bring in a little bit more towards the learning the model, learning a more global model. And this is somewhat that came in discussions on Monday that I alluded to, so I ended up adding this thing in there. There is a very interesting insight over here that we are going to learn skills over here, but I will explain how it falls in a model spectrum over here. So we are going to learn skills. There are a lot of different ways people have thought about skill, and we are picking a different intuition about the skill. So let me start from there. That the way people have looked into skill is you collect a lot of data and you do PCA, and those PCA dimensions are kind of somewhat like one way of looking into skills. Dimensionality reduction is another way of looking into skills. The way we are looking into skills is not just in state dimension, but we are looking into skills into state cross time dimension. Okay, and the way we are calling something as a skill is if you can predict yourself, you are a skill. So predictability in the dynamics is a skill. That's what you're calling. It's pretty bizarre, but a lot of good things come out of this. All right, so the intuition is that if there is a skill, the state distribution, the state action distribution is somewhat constrained in this. You can learn this more easily, but the problem becomes now that there could be so many random things that you can learn over there. How do you make sure that you learn the right skills? That's basically the challenge. So that if you can somehow magically find the right skills, then you can actually, these things will be useful. And there are prior work on this, like Dion and stuff, if someone is familiar. The differences there are is once you learn those skills, you don't know what to do with those skills. We are going to learn here with the dynamics function, so you can repurpose these skills. Sorry, yes?
Isn't one of the core issues here is that like my sensors are vision and I shut my eyes, and I'm very well predicting my future state, and I'm sitting still and not doing anything, and that's not a very good skill.
Yeah, you're going to learn bad skills, yes.
Right?
Yeah, you're going to learn bad skills. Intuition about positives of this skill is think of someone juggling. Even if you close their eyes, they have skills that they can use to roughly juggle the right way. Not exactly.
I guess the question is like, how do you, like, there's so many, as you say, so many different skills to learn. How do you encourage the system to learn at once?
Yeah, we do end up learning a lot of bad skills.
Okay.
It is falling out automatically. That's why we don't care. But you're exactly right that we end up learning skills which are really, really bad. It has nothing to do with being useful. Okay? And one of the ones.
The system on the top doesn't care about that. Like, just sorts them out.
Correct. Yes. So the thing which one of the skill that you will actually like go down into is just staying still, because staying still is the most predictable thing you can do. Okay. So without going too much into the math over here, I'm going to give a general idea. We are parameterizing skills by Z. We are parameterizing skills by Z. The dynamics function of like the skill dynamics, what we are calling skill dynamics, is given a state and the skill, we can predict the state transition. That's what we are calling skills. And the beautiful part of like using this mutual information objective that has a lot of details in there, but is that the skill and the controller of the skill both falls out together. That means given a state and the skill, you know what actions to take. And roughly things go down this way, that like what we are trying to do is if you given a state and a skill, you want to maximize the predictability of the next state. At the same time, what you're going to do is you want to say that like the next state predictions given a different skill should be different. So this is the diversity term and this is the predictability term. So you are incentivizing different skills to be different, and within the skill you're incentivizing the predictions to be better. And yes?
So you know, just mentioned mathematically, what is Z? Is it a policy?
No, Z is basically a label. That's a skill. In discrete setting, Z1, Z2, Z3 are different skills. In continuous setting, Z equals 1.1.2 are different skills. So that's my latent representation. If you
It's a random variable coupled with state transition?
Correct. And we have shown that it works both on discrete when Z are discrete and continuous. Okay. So here are, like, if you ask, like, what do they end up learning? And then you will see that they end up learning pretty bizarre things. Like it doesn't make sense for a lot of things. A lot of things, they will just, like, sleep and not do anything. All right? So they do learn, like you're saying, they do learn a lot of, like, weird things. And, like, here's some pictorial representation of a lot of them overlaid on each other. But, like, if you look into what they're learning, we started looking into some of the feature space. So here is the orientation of that ant. And if you, like, there are 2 dimensions, Z1 and Z2 in this case, you will see that there is some structure that they actually learn in these, a couple of good feature space. So they tend to do, like, good. But, like, yeah, like, a lot of them are, like, it doesn't make sense to us. But that's fine, because these are learned totally unsupervised. We haven't done anything. It's trying to go on offline data that was collected from somewhere. We don't care. It outperforms a lot of model-based planning algorithms. And here are a lot of, like, model-based optimizations. Here are 2 variants, discrete and continuous. And then we just show that for, like, a lot of, like, goal-reaching tasks like these, where you're, like, using goals, and then it's basically searching over the skill space and choosing the skill that makes good progress towards the goal, and then, like, does the MPC style thing again. All right, so I'm going to wrap up, like, pretty quickly over here, and then we'll get some demos going over there. So what has happened right now? So we hit a spectrum, full access to the dynamics, no access to the dynamics. We were able to exploit a lot of gradient-based information when you had access to the dynamics. We got good access to the dynamics. A lot of gradient-based information gave us, like, good sample complexity. But I haven't talked about the sample complexity in these 2 settings not being that great. But we did have the skills. We did have access to the dynamics. So this is something which is bizarre, but it kind of does make sense. Since you are learning the dynamics model in a more generic way, the first-order information of these dynamics are not preserved. So the moment you start using gradient-based planners, they actually tend to take you in random ways. And shooting methods tend to work better than any of the gradient-based planners at the moment. But this is fixable, I think, that when we learn the dynamics model, we have to kind of somehow figure out how to preserve the first-order derivative, second-order derivative information, which I think is a good next step, but I don't think it is that easy at the moment, but we are looking into it. All right, questions? All right, cool. So where things stand together, if the model-based and model-free, really depends on where you are. I heard a lot of great insights over the last 2 days into that if you really take things to the limit infinity, there are great things that we can prove and show in some of the system. But in true reality, what I'm going to argue that it does matter where in the spectrum you are. If you're here in the spectrum, the choices are very biased towards one side of the settings. If you're on the other side of the spectrum, the choices are very different on the other side. But in the middle, I think there is a good class of algorithms over there that can be designed to take insights from both places. And this is where a lot of algorithms like Polo, for example, that was talked yesterday, falls. You can try to combine the benefits of partial model as well as model-free settings, and then you get more accelerated methods in that intersection that I mentioned. Yes?
So why do you think that model-based is losing at the high sample rate G? Because the model is not accurate enough, even if you fit the parameters?
Couple of reasons. One of them is the model is not accurate enough, but if you think of what the policy optimization is doing, it doesn't care about anything else but to optimize for the policy. Right? It can overfit to performance, but if you're going for a model-based method, you're trying to get generalization, fit the model properly, and based on the best understanding of the model, you try to get better information. So there is a trade-off that the model-based method has to play, which the model-free don't have to. They can just, like, overfit to performance. Yeah, that's a great question. Okay, so this is, I poked into one direction of these things, which I call privileges or assumptions, which was the dynamics. Oh my goodness, it's not visible, but this is a very interesting graph that you can ignore right now. But there are lots of other things that starts to matter. And when we start to put everything into perspective and start plotting your algorithm, how they lie in these curves, then the area under the curve starts to matter. And for real system, that is the metric that people care about. that is the way the real systems move forward. So I was having this conversation with Miriam and Alec yesterday that like, as someone who wants to push on what is the best or the highest level of things we can solve, we often come into the constraint that one of these axes are super great, but because of the other axes being super bad, the area becomes large. So it's important to think of like the trade-off, and in a budgeted and constrained settings, if we can get better algorithms, I think that will go a long way. That's my key message over here. Yeah, this is, by the way, I want to show that like how resets, for example, are taken as granted, and it takes up either 4 months for you to design a reset mechanisms or a grad student to spend 4 months to do the reset for you. And this was me as well when I was doing the cube rotation, the tube rotation thing. So yeah, a lot of these things are the real bottlenecks now that the algorithms are trying to scale and actually go out in the real world. I think a lot of these assumptions are really where things are weak, and we need to hit them hard. Okay, so the demo time, I'm going to give a short spiel on what the demo is, why it is important. Like I said, there is these huge spectrum and axes on which we are trying to minimize the area of all the algorithms, right? But it becomes important to actually be able to probe those settings equally well. And this is not where I'm trying to solve DARPA robotics challenge. This is not where I'm trying to do Atlas backflip. This is basically think of pure science and trying to minimize the area of this curve. So in those settings, I think I take intuition from the domain of physics, where what they did was design something that was called an optical bench. Most of the Hubble telescope, electron microscope, etc., those intuitions were first tested over here, and they led to bigger developments when people scaled and found the right fundamentals. This is what I think is somewhat missing for robotics right now, that everyone is trying to do a lot of things where things are different, and there are a couple of platforms on which I'm trying to build my intuition, and I'm going to share these things with you guys, and starting today, it's going to be public and online, so feel free to share with everyone. These are robotics benchmarks for learning. These are benchmarks. There are some important, interesting things over there as well. So let me try to just show you really quickly. There are few benchmarks there are few hardware platforms which are very modular. The interesting things about these platforms are that these are modules that you can reconfigure in any ways you want. Here are the 3 settings I've shown you guys, but if you have different applications, just go for a different application. Just the same thing is going to work for you in terms of software, hardware settings. It's really easy to reconfigure all of those things. That kind of gives you the optical bench illusion that take a lens out, put a lens in kind of a setting. There are 2 platforms. One of them is called the Claw. Another one is called the Kitty. The good thing about these things are that these are modular. You can compose any number of degree of freedom. These are super cheap to build, so advisors, please spend some money. Give your students one of these. $3,500, $4,200, great things. In my team, everyone in my team has one on their desk, and the kind of experiments they run is bizarre. Like, you will have never thought that anyone who will ever run experiments are running experiments right now. One of them is Sham's student, Arvind. If you ever ask Sham, Arvind will touch a hardware. Sham, will Arvind ever touch a hardware?
He's supposedly doing that now.
It's correct, because these things are easy to use, and that's how it's easy to use. The best part is that the price point scales linearly with the degrees of freedom. So you can try to build a more expensive system. And the reason I went down this route is I work with a lot of high-dimensional systems. And these high-dimensional systems tend to break frequently. The shadow hand, I fix every 2 days. It is ridiculously expensive, and I can't really send it back to London every day, so I have to build these systems. To the date, these systems have over 15,000 hours recorded on them without breakage. So that's great. I'm going to quickly gloss over some results on that. Please refer to the videos and papers associated with them. They scale incredibly well. You can pack it in a backpack, take it with you. Here are some flexible object manipulation you can do with them. Here are some disturb intersections. You can play evil. They know how to take care of themselves. You can take one of the systems out. You know what they can do. Things are pretty scalable, parallelizable. We are learning multitask over here, different objects. They're setting different settings, and then they're learning together how to learn how to turn, etc. Here is the walking robot that can walk over anything. Literally, you give it on the way, get caught in the wires. It can go over all those things, push things on the way. We have been walking it outside, indoors, you name it. Here is a paper that we recently published where we let a couple of them out in the wild. They learn how to interact with objects. If you give big objects, they learn how to coordinate within themselves and do good things and better things by trying to figure out how to make both of them move together. There are some benchmarks that for you to get started, good software, everything for you to like just get ready and go in an hour. Okay, so without getting too much bottled down here, just a last point that like, yes, these systems have resulted in a good collection of results so far from a diverse group, so kind of making the point that they are widely useful, which you can take a look into. Cool. And then let's do the demos. All right, so in the first one, what is going to happen is the top one is a target, which you can start picking yourself. If someone wants to come pick a target, they can definitely come and pick the target. And the policy is trained in a way to start matching the target to the best it can. The bottom axis is really slippery. So if you just like do something like simple, it just follows like. All right, so you roughly get the idea of like what is going over here. All right, so I'm going to be a little bit quick over here and go to the next one. I can play these more later if you want to come up after. Here you just randomly let the top thing pick a random number generator on the top. It's trying to pick a velocity and a target, and the bottom one is trying to actually match the best it could actually do. And we can hit it with any algorithm. You can just study different algorithms. It is robust, self-sufficient, independent, that you can run most of these things remotely. We do run everything remotely. All right, so that's a manipulation platform. We just took the same thing, put like 4 of them down there, and that's a locomotion platform now. So I'm going to make a fool of myself here, but be with me because there is no tracking in the room. So it is completely running blind, but at least I can probably show you is the policies that we have been able to learn on these simple systems are robust enough that it can at least stay upright, handle all of these things by itself. So yeah, it doesn't have any tracking, so it doesn't know like where the target is. I've roughly given a target which is in the front. So that's a reset. That's a reset. It didn't fall down. It's a reset. It's asking you to go again. So you see the kind of policies and behaviors that it exhibits. It's okay. Can you? No, don't pull the wire.
You put a leash.
Yeah, I should push the leash. Yeah, I tried to put a reset so it doesn't go far enough. But look, like you saw probably, like here's a different friction, completely different friction with those, and it still understands how to handle those things properly. And these are the systems that I showed how to coordinate videos where we have like multiple of these systems. We have made a small house for them now where they kind of live together, explore the world, figure out where the kitchen is. The best thing is these are like, we call it the kitty, so it's a cat robot, but it doesn't poop, so you don't have to do anything to clean up the poop. This is great. And with that, I think I'll just stop over here. I think I'm a little over time. But feel free to come by later, and then I'll be happy to answer more questions.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Yes.
All right. Actually, I wanted to ask you this last week as well. I'm really curious about what your thoughts are about this. So one of the things that you mentioned that's important to kind of look at is reset. And it seems like these benchmarking platforms are designed in such a way that if I make mistakes or if I perturb the system a small amount, it's basically stable. It doesn't it doesn't necessarily trigger a reset, or like resetting seems very, very easy. And so I'll try to figure out how to kind of say my broader point. And it's not totally formalized in my head yet, but the idea, the thing that I'm a little bit concerned about is like a lot of the problems which are the hardest in robotics are ones where a small perturbation to the decision that you make results in potentially a catastrophic failure.
Correct.
So for example, if instead of having like a four-legged robot, you had like a bipedal walker, it's a lot harder to reset that system, and a small mistake causes it to fall over and require a reset.
Yes.
Another example is like the rally car. If you're in slip and you take the wrong action, reset might require rebuilding the car.
Correct.
Like
yes.
So what I'm wondering is, like, do you think that there's a certain type of problems that these sorts of benchmarks kind of like they make sense for machine learning in that it's easy to collect lots of data, and are those problems really the ones which are like the most interesting from robotics?
So I'll tell you my take. I don't advocate a right answer here. My take is that the more you have the ability to ask those questions, the better off you are. Okay, I didn't show those results today at the moment, but we are running these robots in a non-episodic settings 24/7. They fail. When you start executing them, like they are floppy systems, like they don't know how to stand up. Like you saw trained policy, it will crash down. So it starts by doing catastrophic failures and then builds up from there. So it does, there is like details into this, well, feel free to browse around more, but there are like videos over here where we do learn a lot of like these getting up policies along the way as well. So it does like start from random places and tries to get up first. So it is trying to handle those questions. Can I actually design a reset policy myself? Yes. I can cheat the system, but I don't care about doing Atlas backflip. I care about minimizing the area on that giant spectrum that I show. And if you are careful and you're basically being optimistic, you can carve these problems out. That's what we are trying to do. We will be overfitting to this, but at this point, overfitting to the real world is a good thing to do, is my argument. Yes, we will scale, we will build a Hubble telescope from there, but it's not today. We're going to ask small questions today and then hopefully build from there.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go to break until 11:05, so 15 minutes. Short break. Thank you.